And we can begin because it's 5 past the hour. Thanks everyone for attending or watching after the fact. Their webinar today, which is part of the Physics and Astronomy Sea Change program, is on Astrobites and is with Dr. Briley Lewis from University of California, Santa Barbara. And I'll let her take it away.
Cool. Hi, everyone. So I was asked to tell you guys about Astrobites. So today we're going to talk about what Astrobites has done in terms of just like what the collaboration is, but also, how our work has impacted the undergrads that read our publication, and also how it's impacted the grad student authors who, you know, run this collaboration. And then there's also just sort of I'll give you a description of all the things Astrobites does so that you can see how it might be able to fit into your work. So if you would like to download these slides, you can scan this QR code if you need them for accessibility reasons or you just want to have them. So I'll give you a second to do that if you so desire. Okay. So yes, who am I? My name is Briley Lewis. I just got my doctorate at UCLA last month, and now I'm a NSF postdoc at UC Santa Barbara. So I am technically a retired Astrobites author now. So I joined the collaboration in 2019 in my first year of grad school. And the way that authorship works is that you're on the regular rotation of authors for 2 years nominally. But then you can continue being active in the collaboration, helping with our administration and all sorts of committees we have. But now that I'm a postdoc, I'm like pretty officially retired. It's the current grad students who are running things. In my time in Astrobites, I was a part of a lot of the different committees that keep our collaboration running. So I served on our admin committee, our education committee, our editorial committee, and I led a recent education study with Astrobites that we will talk about today. And that is my dog, Rocky. In the photo, he is here and he might bark. We're currently traveling for a conference. So what is Astrobites? Astrobites is a grad student-run collaboration, and our focus is making research in astronomy accessible, equitable, and engaging. So the main way we do that is by publishing these daily, what we call accessible summaries of recent research articles from astro-ph. So we take papers that have been posted to the archive and we make what we also sometimes call a bite. So it's this bite-sized summary of that research article. The intended audience is undergraduates who have some kind of interest in astronomy. Perhaps they're trying to get into research in astronomy. But our readership is a lot broader than that. We have high schoolers that are interested in science that read it. We have undergrads who are in their classes for becoming an astronomy major. We have grad students who read it. We have amateur astronomers who read it. There's lots of people that actually read this publication now from our recent readership surveys. So what we do is we post that summary of a new research article every single day. So there's always a new paper out every single day. We train graduate students in science communication because they are the ones who write these summaries. And we provide a whole bunch of other valuable resources to the astronomy community. I'm pretty happy to say that Astrobites has quite a big reach now and has done a lot of great things, from creating resources for career guidance to being involved in giving AAS workshops, all sorts of things. So our mission, as it is officially written, our goal is to present one interesting paper per day in a brief format that's accessible to undergraduate students in the physical sciences who are interested in active research. And one of our core values is inclusivity. So we at Astrobites support and encourage universal participation in science, regardless of minoritized status. And we really place a big emphasis on eliminating the injustices that prevent people from participating in science. So we want to make sure that everyone can benefit from participation in science. And we know that this is a task that is critical for science also. So we have a very deep passion for making sure that astronomy is inclusive and equitable. We also have a couple of major partners. So Astrobites, originally our first partner was the American Astronomical Society. So one of the things that we do is we provide live blogging coverage of the yearly AAS conferences, both the winter and the summer meeting. We do these interviews with the plenary speakers to hear about their career and share advice with younger students. And we promote AAS like NOVA publications, like some of our bites get cross-posted with them. And in return, AAS hosts and supports our website and provides some of our authors who go to AAS for that conference coverage with registration and membership. So the pictures here, one is some Astrobiters at our AAS grad school fair a couple years ago. And then this other one is actually me giving a talk on Astrobites at last winter AAS. We also more recently started a partnership with APS, specifically with their physical review journals. And so we offer now 2 PRJ articles per month. So we're trying to expand into a little bit of our, physics side and make sure that astronomers can be involved with APS too. And we also cover the APS division of astrophysics sessions at the April APS meeting. So this is similar to our AAS meeting coverage where we go and we do this press coverage and get some registration in return. So these are all very cool opportunities for grad students to, be a big part of these meetings. And Astrobites is growing. It has been around for a little over a decade now. And our total monthly views are over 100,000. And yearly we get, I want to say it's almost 700,000 views. And our viewership is from across the world, mostly from the US, also largely from Canada and Europe, but we have readers in many other countries as well. And we're always trying to, make Astrobites better. Right now, some of the current collaboration members are in talks to have ArXiv and ADS maybe be able to link to Astrobite summaries for the preprints that they're related to. And as always, we're looking for possibilities of financial support for our members because this is a lot of labor that currently is done on a mostly volunteer basis. And there are a lot of benefits, which we'll talk about, but we care about fair compensation because inclusivity. And not only is Astrobites growing, but we're actually part of a large network of what we call Science Bites sites. So these are like Astrobites, but for different disciplines. So Astrobites was the first, and this whole sort of constellation has grown from that. Some of them are Astrobites in different languages. So we have Astrobites in Spanish, in Portuguese, and sometimes Astrobites authors who speak other languages but aren't able to run a whole site on their own will put translations with their Astrobites on our main site. We also have Astro Sound Bites, which is a podcast that is about, a daily paper. And then there's just all of these other things too. So like Evo Bites for evolutionary biology, Particle Bites for particle physics, Per Bites, which is physics education research. So there are all of these different sites that can help with, sorry, got a bug. There are all these different sites that can help with getting these accessible summaries out there to help students in different fields. One in particular that I wanted to highlight, because I know this is, the American Association of Physics Teachers. So if there are any K through 12 teachers watching, one of particular interest is Bite Size. And so this particular Science Bites site creates lesson plans that are designed by teams of both content experts and education experts so that they are aligned with K through 12 curricula. And these lesson plans feature bite-sized summaries of real research so that your students can actually, even in like a high school physics class, start to get a sense of what real research looks like. So that one might be of interest to some people. So we'll first talk about undergrad readers and then graduate student writers. So what impact does Astrobites have on the readers of our site, on the undergrads who this website is intended for? And there are many benefits we've seen sort of anecdotally. So seen that it's helpful for getting into research and doing a sort of modified literature search when, reading a bunch of papers is still quite intimidating. Astrobites has this large repository of career knowledge, including these sort of academic unwritten rules that are often a huge barrier to first-gen students like myself. We have examples of role models that are diverse and relatable from all of these different like interview bites that we have. We try to make sure that we have a lot of examples of what a scientist can look like and what a career can look like. And we found that Astrobites actually improves students' confidence reading scientific papers when used in classes in college. And we did a study on this, which I will talk about a bit more. So for college students, for undergrads, we have these 4 sort of lesson plan shells that we've made. One is for periodic reading assignments where you have your students periodically read Astrobites and answer some guided questions about them. If you want to level it up, you can incorporate the original research paper as well. There's a research project, which is sort of that modified lit search in order to do a sort of research project on a topic where you're using Astrobites instead of having to use the original papers. We have a writing assignment, which is actually writing your own Astrobite, where students translate a paper into an Astrobite. I've done that one with my students, actually with some non-major students. So with people who's, they're taking this astronomy course that I taught as like a gen ed class. And they still wrote an Astrobite, and it was pretty incredible. And then we also have this presentation assignment, which is a sort of in-class talk based on specifically an Astrobites interview and a related paper from that person. So this is a way to sort of bring those diverse role models into your classroom. So the education study we did recently was testing the efficacy of these lesson plans. So we had a whole bunch of students from courses across different kinds of institutions, but all of the students were astronomy or related majors. And so we gave them a survey before and after they experienced one of these activities. And we also interviewed the educators who used these lesson plans. So across all of the areas that we wanted to probe, students improved. They improved most largely in being able, in their reported confidence, their self-reported confidence in being able to find the main takeaways of a research paper or an Astrobite. Their self-reported confidence with dealing with scientific jargon went up significantly. And then there's sort of a moderate positive improvement for their self-report of their conceptual understanding of astronomy concepts, for their sense of their own ability in the field, and for their ability to communicate about science. And then there was a marginal improvement in their sense of belonging in the field. But interestingly, when we look at deeper at the data, we find that the sense of belonging increasing very slightly is actually because a lot of them came in with a quite strong sense of belonging to begin with. So they didn't have much higher to go. So when we did some qualitative questions too, and so we asked students, how do you feel about reading research papers? We asked them before and after. And after, they reported far fewer feelings of intimidation. They've reported fewer times of feeling unprepared. They reported that they had more of a sense of these papers being important and slightly more confidence to do this, and that it's a worthwhile task. However, they also thought afterwards that they more often mentioned that papers require effort, and they less often mentioned enjoying them. And so we interpreted this as students having a sort of more realistic understanding of the task, where it's like, okay, I can do this, but papers are hard and they can be dense, they can be long, and they're not all super well written. So in a way, this is still good because it is preparing them for a career to tackle this kind of research. And so some things that we heard from participants in their qualitative responses, the activity helped me to understand the findings of a research paper at my level of knowledge. It wasn't too technical and it wasn't too dumbed down either. The scholarly article was the most difficult and confusing, but I'm really glad I overcame that and learned what all of that research had offered me. And I found the length of Astrobites less daunting to read about and made the experience more enjoyable. This is some stuff that we've heard from educators. So when we interviewed the educators about how things went, one said, with an Astrobites post, it's been simplified enough that we can cover it in one class, but they still get a lot of the same benefits they get from working with the article directly. Someone else said, I do think they're more prepared because they told me so. But then from my perspective, I could see what they were writing, asking deeper questions. I saw the improvement in their work. And another person said, Astrobites enabled the possibility to connect to the paper because the original paper was so inaccessible for the current know-how of the students. So the takeaways here, accessible summaries like Astrobites can be a positive influence on entry-level student experiences with research literature. It can help them have a little bit more confidence, a little bit less feelings of intimidation. And in particular, our Astrobite lesson plans had the biggest effect in improving student confidence with reading comprehension, with finding the main takeaways and parsing jargon for research literature. And you should try them. They are available for completely free on our website. And if you're interested in the preprint of this paper, because it's still in review, you can use that QR code there. So I'll give you a second to scan the QR code, and later in this talk, I will give you the specific address where these are located on our website. Okay, so what impact does Astrobites have on our grad student authors? So I'll start off with some of the things that our authors say. So I've included the authors' photos and where they are now so that you can get an idea of sort of who Astrobiters are. So this is from Dr. Luna Zagorac, who is now a postdoc at Perimeter Institute. And so she said, not only did I get to meet fellow students and talk to some of the leaders in the field, years later, I was offered a paid contributing writer gig, mostly based on my body of work for Astrobites. Another author, Cole Meldorf, who's a grad at University of Pennsylvania, said, my time at Astrobites has drastically improved my confidence in my scientific writing and speaking. I also get to learn about astronomy outside of my niche subfield, meet other young astronomers, and get more practice in reading scientific papers. Dr. Haley Wall, who is now actually a lead writer at MIT's Lincoln Lab in their communications department, said, I gained a support network that helped me through grad school, and I made friends I still communicate with to this day. And another thing that she said was, being an Astrobites completely changed my career path. My experience with Astrobites led me to the AAS Media Fellowship in my last year of grad school, which convinced me that my interests and skills were better aligned with a career in science writing and science communication. She said, I've had no formal training in science writing, but Astrobites helped me develop the skills I needed to succeed in the field. And this is something that both from sort of like my experience in the field anecdotally and from some surveys I've done, formal science writing courses for graduate students are quite rare. So it is great that we have this opportunity for students to get those skills still. And then from William Lamb, who's a grad at Vanderbilt, said, it's improved my confidence as a scientific writer and as a clear explainer of astro-related concepts. I've also enjoyed expanding my horizons and reading beyond my thesis. So I've sort of summarized what I've heard from our authors into a couple of points of what the authors would get from this. So one is that support network of peers. So these are just photos that I had on hand. So on the left, we always have a meetup of Astrobiters at AAS. So that's this nice big community that everyone gets to see each other and like have someone at the meeting that they know and that they can be a part of this group. In the middle is actually Haley, who I mentioned a few slides ago. She became one of my best friends in grad school thanks to Astrobites. And I went to her wedding last year. And then on the right, when I was visiting New York City last year, I, just put a message on the Astrobites Slack and said, okay, who's in New York City? Who wants to get lunch? And I had lunch with a group of Astrobiters. And this is something that happens a lot, is whenever Astrobiters are in the same city, they'll meet up with whoever's visiting. And they'll meet up at conferences. And so it's this great way to, have all of these different connections in the field. And not only is it great for the sort of emotional support that everyone needs to get through grad school, but it's a network of people that you can rely on in your career too. So in my freelance writing career, I have often used Astrobiters as a way of like finding, someone who has the answer to a question that I need or can provide a quote on a topic. There's also like when it comes to time to give like, talks for postdoc jobs. If there was an institution that I was like, okay, I'm interested in giving a talk here, but I don't even know where to start, I would be like, hey, person at this institution from Astrobites, do you guys have a talk series? And who should I contact about that? So it really is like just an excellent form of networking in multiple senses of the word. Two, it also gives you opportunities to engage with leaders in the field, with people who are in those faculty positions. So what I would consider slightly more traditional networking. So with our AAS plenary speaker interviews, that gives you a chance to talk one-on-one with someone who, has made enough of an impact in the field to have a AAS invited talk. When we're representing Astrobites in our meeting booths, that's a lot of people that we get to talk to. A lot of people come up to ask us things. Astrobites is also a great way of getting your name out there. So since a lot of people in the field read our publication, they'll see your bylines. And then this one was a little bit more true before Twitter's demise, but is still true. Social media interactions, like if someone, posts to say, hey, I did this bite, that will often get a lot of engagement from, different people in the field. Number three, Astrobites gives SciComm skills and opportunities to start a career in communication, outreach, or writing. So the way that our publication works is that it's very collaborative. So authors also act as editors for other bites in order to give constructive feedback. So in order to learn these writing and editing skills, older authors mentor newer authors to help oversee the editing process and help teach them how to give constructive comments. And one of the biggest things in writing is practice, practice, practice. And so this gives you a lot of practice to do that science communication writing. And then we also have a lot of connections with other writing and training opportunities like ComSciCon, a communicating science workshop for grad students. Number four, Astrobites gives our authors exposure and bylines to establish credibility and to have clips if they want to do science writing or other outreach careers. So the things listed here are all publications or organizations that our members have been involved with in some way or published in. So a couple of them I have done, like I have published in Scientific American, PopSciSpace.com. We've had people who have become like the AAS Nova like yearly intern. Someone did the AAAS Media Fellowship and worked for the LA Times. We have a lot of members involved with running ComSciCon and so much more. So this is just a small selection of the things that our authors have ended up being involved with, which are, these renowned publications and organizations. And in order to write for larger publications, you often need to have some bylines in order to say, look, hey, I can write, like you should hire me. And our science writing experience also helps in academic careers too. So a good number of our authors have become faculty and have said that, the fact that they could say that they were, good at writing, good at communicating was helpful in their job search. So I put 3 examples of Astrobiters with fantastic faculty jobs. So we've got Ashley Villar at Harvard, Mia de los Reyes at Amherst, and Milena Rice at Yale. All right, number 5, improved confidence in science writing skills. So again, practice, practice, practice is the key for writing and the key for feeling more confident as a writer. I teach writing, or I should say taught writing when I was at UCLA. And I would say this to my students all the time, practice is key for writing skills. And the other thing that's really important for writing skills is lots of opportunities for feedback. And so by getting that feedback, both constructive and positive, you start to develop this sort of identity as a writer and this confidence in your ability. And there's also feedback beyond the collaboration. Like we do actually pretty actively engage with comments on our website. So there are all of these chances for our authors to get feedback on their work. And then number 6, a benefit is learning broadly about astronomy, like staying up to date with new papers on the arXiv. So authors have the autonomy to choose what they cover. Like they have to pick what paper they cover. They are not assigned in any way. So that means you gotta take a look at the arXiv and see what you're interested in. And so this is a good sort of extra reason for students to be on the arXiv reading new papers. And they get to pick things that are outside of their field. Like often in grad school, it'll be like, okay, search the archive for things that seem relevant to my research, move on. But this, you can say, okay, well, I have a reason to read this X-ray astronomy paper, even though I'm an exoplanets person, because I'm going to write about it. And we also encourage authors to participate in our PRJ partnership, where they are writing about these articles from journals they may not encounter as often. And we encourage our writers and actually schedule them regularly to write what we call beyond posts, which are about career navigation, resources in astronomy, astronomy history, DEI, all sorts of things. So now I'll move on to the last section, which is how Astrobites can be useful for you. This is sort of a rapid fire summary of some of the things that we offer beyond those daily summary bites. So if you are an educator of some kind, we have those lesson plans that I mentioned earlier, and they are on our website. So the reading assignments are great for reading comprehension, familiarity with literature, conceptual understanding if they're trying to tackle a challenging paper. Student research projects, which is like a literature review, helps with reading comprehension, synthesis between multiple articles, and interpreting data. We have the student writing assignment, which helps with reading comprehension, communication and composition skills. And then the interview presentation, which again helps with reading comprehension, communication, but also these sort of, belonging and DEI goals. We do often partner with classes. So if you do a writing assignment where students write an Astrobite in your class, they can work with an Astrobites editor to refine and eventually publish that article with us. So this is a very cool opportunity where an undergraduate student gets to have this published byline, and they get to have the experience of working with an editor to refine their work. And if that's something you're interested in, we have an email for the education committee, education@astrobites.org. All you have to do is email us and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Like, where should I start? And we can help you with, figuring out how you want to fit the Astrobites writing assignment in your class and getting your students connected with editors. We also have AAS workshops every couple of years. So one that we did at AAS 240 was, this cool splinter session on how to introduce current research into your classroom with Astrobites. And we have a lot of teaching related bites too. So we have this web page. So if you go to our website and then click on the Beyond astro-ph dropdown, there's a Teaching with Astrobites page, which has our lesson plans, information on having your students publish with us, and a list of bites that are related to teaching and education. And we've done education research studies, like I mentioned. So we have 2 earlier papers that were, sort of qualitative case studies of how our lesson plans impacted students, Sanders et al. 2012, Sanders et al. 2017, and then this recent one that I described where it's a more quantitative study in 2020. 2023 is when it was submitted, but review can take a while, especially when you're trying to finish a thesis, and so you take a while on revisions. So again, if you want to see that new paper, this is the same QR code I had at the end of that section. We also have one of our sister sites, PerBites, the physics education research bites site. So if you want to keep up with physics education research, this could be a great site for you. And then Astrobites for students. So what are all the different ways that we can help help students, undergrads and grad students? One, these career guidance bites that I've mentioned. So from REU apps to tips to getting into grad school, to tips for being in grad school, and even like postdoc apps, all sorts of things are on here. And it's not just the standard, like, here are the things you should do to get into grad school. We have these very personal bites, like this one that's on here from Sabina Sagambayeva, about being rejected from PhD programs, which is a thing that many students encounter, and hopefully won't be, the end to their career. Hopefully they will be able to get through it, and we want to help them. We also do panels and workshops. So we did a panel on finding, choosing, and changing advisors, since advisors can be such an important, critical part of grad school. And so 5 different student panelists offered their personal stories and advice on how to go about finding a, quote, good advisor. And there are opportunities to write for us. So we accept pitches for guest posts from grad students and early career researchers. One note is you cannot write about your own research. That's not a great journalistic practice, so we don't allow it. But if you want to write a bite, if you want to just write like a one-off and not join the collaboration, we are open to guest posts. We've published some great beyond guest posts from people who are, passionate about certain topics in outreach and education. And we do also accept submissions from undergraduates to write about their own research. So these are smaller, like mini bites, where undergrads can say, look what I'm working on, and it's practice for them to talk about their work. And we do hire new graduate student authors to be permanent members of the collaboration every fall. So our hiring call goes out every fall. We hire a cohort of new authors that start in about January, and then they're part of the team. And then lastly, my last section is Astrobites Beyond. So beyond strictly, the science, what else can we do here at Astrobites? So we do have Astrobites in different languages, like I mentioned. One of the most prominent of our other language sites is Astrobitos, which is Astrobites in Spanish. Astro Soundbites is our biweekly podcast that features some different Astrobites and the papers that they cover. This is hosted by a bunch of grad students who are in the collaboration. Apologies, I did not take out their recruiting for co-hosts. They did hire some new co-hosts earlier this year. And we also cover current events and conferences. So if you can't make it to AAS, we have daily summaries. And we cover smaller meetings too that our writers are at and interested in. I mentioned this briefly earlier, celebrating diverse identity. So we have our interview series, we have guest posts, and we have these cool historical posts like queer figures in astronomy history, because we want our platform to amplify the voices and share the experiences of traditionally marginalized identities in astronomy. We also partner with Black and Astro. So we have a very close collaboration with them. And Black and Space Week is this really thriving yearly tradition where Black and Astro has this whole week of panels, articles, social events, different things for the Black and Astro community. We have bites on accessibility. This is something I'm personally quite passionate about, where we talk about different accessibility initiatives and ways that you can make your work more accessible. We also have been quite clear in our stance about harassment, which has been an issue in astronomy over the past few decades. So we have bites that are about how to create a safe research environment, how to advocate for a safe research environment. And we have a very strict no tolerance policy for this in our collaboration. Last year, we also created this call for action against harassment in astronomy. If you're interested in reading it, it's this QR code. And the three main action items were to have conversations at your research institution, addressing these questions about how we handle harassment in astronomy and how we create a safe environment, create a code of conduct for your research group or department, and stop giving a voice to those who continue to make our community unsafe. Another huge issue, climate change. So we have done these Earth Week times Astrobites events where there are panels, special bites, all sorts of events and things. This year's theme was about how we can learn from Indigenous wisdom and how that can help us in our stewardship of Earth and the climate crisis. So some questions that they explore: how does climate change impact astronomy? How does doing astronomy affect the climate crisis? How can astronomy and science communication inform our efforts as climate stewards? They have some great things about the environmental impact of telescopes, how we as astronomers can be more aware of our carbon footprint, all sorts of things. And they have a mailing list that you can sign up with the QR code here. So in conclusion, Astrobites has a lot to offer to astronomers of all career stages, from these accessible research summaries to career guidance, lesson plans you can use in your classroom, and so much more. And as a graduate-run student initiative, it's very cool that we've been able to do all of this. And it's a really active collaboration that is trying to create change in a positive way in so many ways in our field. We're trying to make it easier for undergrads to get into research. We're trying to help grad students with their writing skills, which will in turn make the field more accessible as those grad students write better papers. and we want to support people with community throughout their careers. So then that's basically it. If you want to stay in touch, we do still have a Twitter that we use. I refuse to call it X. So you can follow us at Astrobites. We're also on Blue Sky at Astrobites. If you have undergrad research, undergrads that you want to submit their research, or if you have guest post ideas, you can email our submissions at astrobites.org page. And if you'd like to email me in particular about anything, I'm happy to share my knowledge and point you to the person in the collaboration that would be most relevant for whatever it is that you're interested in. So that's my email and my Twitter. And if you'd like these slides, you can get them there. And that is where I'll stop. I'm happy to take questions.
Great, thank you so much. While we wait for some questions, out of curiosity, from your takes, much as, and don't know if this is in some of the literature that that's been written on astrobites, what are some of the more engaging posts for undergraduate students in the astrobites that you think students will just immediately be like, yay, we want to learn more about this?
Yeah, I think I think it's actually a lot of them. One of the things that we really try to do is have a like fun, fairly informal and humorous style. So we have bites that the titles are like, Taylor Swift references and memes and all sorts of things. Like someone recently made the little like thumbnail image for their bite, something that was in the style of the Charlie XCX Brat cover. And so there's all of these different like sort of entry points for students to find something like, kind of fun that they relate to. Um, I would have to look at our viewership stats because we can actually see what posts have been the most popular. Um, but there are some things that have been just kind of like big in general, like exoplanets has been, this really growing thing, especially as we, think towards the Habitable Worlds Observatory. There are some posts that, get a lot of traction in general in science journalism, like dark matter, these great mysteries. And I think some of our most popular bites have been ones that are about current events too. Like we've covered when there's an astronomy related Nobel Prize, we've done a dive into what the research is behind that Nobel. So I don't have a super clear answer, but there's a lot of options depending on kind of what you're looking for.
Got it, something for everyone. And do you have any tips or anything that people should know before they start using astrobites in their teaching? Just anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, so I'm going to give two different sets of advice. So one would be using astrobites with non-major students, which is something that we haven't done a research study on. I did some separate work when I taught Astro GE classes and did a lot of writing with them, some of which did involve astrobites. This can actually be really useful for non-major students as well, because showing them current research can be so much more exciting and interesting and feel more like worthwhile and applicable than just saying, okay, read this textbook. So when I was working with non-major students, I found that astrobites was a way of being able to get them to like kind of appreciate what science really means, like not just textbook facts, but actually this active, world of research and people communicating their science in these fun ways. Like a lot of students come into college with some pretty rough stereotypes of physics from their high school education. And, being able to show them, look, it's brat, but astronomy is something that like anyone can sort of feel a little bit more like, okay, like I do have something in common with this, even if I've been sort of told earlier in my life that like science isn't for me. And then for students who are majoring in astronomy, sorry, that actually wasn't a tip. I feel like my tip is use astrobites and like make it clear that science can be for everyone. And that like, something that I really emphasize with my students was if something in science, isn't making sense, if it feels inaccessible to you, it's probably because the thing is inaccessible and it's not because you are not good enough. So having that sort of emphasis and using astrobites as a way to say like, hey, I know this research paper looks like super intimidating, but we can also explain it this easier way. That helped me a lot with non-major students and with astronomy majors. I think I would have benefited earlier in my undergrad career from seeing current research so that I knew sort of what the edges were of the field. Like, what are we still working on? What isn't established yet? And so using Astrobites in that way can be really helpful. Some tips would be like, choose which Astrobites you want to use. Don't just like set them loose on the website. That's too open-ended. Maybe for more advanced students that can be okay, but generally, all of our posts are tagged with like what topics they are. So if you're doing a lesson on black holes, you could find a couple of Astrobites that you think make sense and relate to concepts you want to teach about black holes. So being, a little more conscientious about how you're giving this to them instead of just saying, look, there's a resource for you. Yeah.
That makes sense. I think because I'm thinking now this would be a really good resource for students to pick sort of a subgenre of for this case, astrophysics, but like any of the bites, because sometimes students see the first thing, they like it without realizing there's so many other great things that they could conceivably
Yeah,
like even more, or, just consider all their possibilities.
exactly. I think one other piece of advice I would give is don't hesitate to reach out to the collaboration. We have, the submissions email address for if you want to submit posts. We also have our more general education email and our very general info@astrobites.org. So if you're like, hey, I kind of want to do this thing with Astrobites, but like I could use some advice from someone who knows this resource better, like people in the collaboration are genuinely happy to help and interested in collaborating with people. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out.
Great. And so to pivot a little bit, so you mentioned that Astrobites is sort of, maybe this is I'm thinking of it as sort of a secondary benefit, is that you've created these really awesome informal networks among the authors.
Mhm.
What are some of the practices and things that you feel like they've done a really good job to make sure that these networks are happening, that people feel well supported, and good things can happen?
Yeah, we've worked really hard over the years to create a culture that's very welcoming. So when new authors come in, we make sure to have an introductions channel every year where no matter how long you've been in the collaboration, you reintroduce yourself so people can get to know you. In our Slack workspace, that is. Um, the pairing up of like mentorship with older authors and newer authors is very helpful. I feel like that's not super groundbreaking. We know that mentorship is great. Um, and generally sort of the people who have been there, um, just kind of carrying on and passing along to the younger generations, like, hey, this is how we do things, like this is, come to our AAS meetup, and like really encouraging people to talk to others. Um, and then another thing is our code of conduct, which is very clear. And it's not just clear and like, don't do this, don't do this. It's like, here is our values. Here is how we want to treat other people in this collaboration. Here are guidelines for how we should interact with each other. And we do have an internal process for code of conduct violation complaints, or generally anything that, is an issue between two authors. So we do have like internal processes, and they're all rooted in ideas of transformative justice. So it's really community focused. So those are some things that I think are helpful for us.
Got it. That's great stuff. And so one last question then. How do you feel trained everybody to give constructive feedback? 'Cause I know that's a really tricky thing for everybody to do, and people can think they're being constructive and they're not. And then it's also hard for authors, even if somebody is legitimately being
Mhm.
constructive, to hear that.
Yeah, so this is something that I would say that we are constantly working on, and getting better at, because it is hard. So most of the way that editing and writing skills are taught in astronomy is from one mentor saying, here's how you do things, to another person. And that is still kind of our model, where it's like the older authors have, sort of passed down this knowledge of like, here are some things that are helpful to point out. Here are some ways to phrase things so that they are, constructive and positive, if not, unnecessarily mean. We don't want anyone to be reviewer two in Astrobites. Um, I'm actually thinking about this a lot recently. Like now that I did have some like formal education in grad school as a writing instructor. Um, and so I'm still brainstorming ways that we can formalize that a bit more. both in Astrobites actually and in the field as a whole. So it's actually part of my NSF grant for my postdoc. So we'll see what I come up with in terms of teaching writing and editing skills for grad students.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions. I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes. But yeah, thanks.
Sounds good.